Good evening. Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi. B'schus refuah shlema for Rabbi Aaron's mother-in-law, Hadra Bas Esther, or Bat Esther, either one, both of them. Refuah shlema. And we are on Samach Dalad Amabez, second line, Hadr Yasvi B'kamei Boiluhu. So these chachamim that we were discussing yesterday, they were sitting and having conversations about several points. When they continued, they asked the following question: Ger toshav mahu sheyevatel avodas kachavim. The question is a ger toshav, right? What's a ger toshav? A ger toshav is a non-Jewish fellow who takes on the personal responsibilities to be a law-abiding non-Jew.
Like a law-abiding citizen type of.
We're going to see what he has to take on. We're just going to discuss what exactly that means. That he has to presume that he has to be able to take upon, but it's a declaration that he is going to follow the rules properly. So, since he's going to follow the rules properly, is he now no longer able to nullify Avodah Zara? Because somebody who worships Avodah Zara, is the element that allows somebody to refute Avodah Zara the fact that they are an idolater themselves, therefore they can knock it off? What if you have, this was Jeremy's question, right? When he first came, you keep saying non-Jew, you mean idolater, and the answer is yeah, idolater, because this is a non-Jew who's following the rules. So what about this circumstance? So, de palach mevatel, de lo palach lo mevatel. If he's serving Avodah Zara, does that mean now he can nullify Avodah Zara because he understands and means business by it? But if he doesn't serve idolatry, then he can't. Odilma, or perhaps called davar mine, called debar mine mevatel, v'hai bar minehu. Right? Anybody who is anybody who is not able to be, who is not Jewish, right? He's not Jewish. So therefore, does that mean he can nullify it? So what's the most important part of it? So Amar lehu Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman says, Mistabra de palach mevatel de lo palach mevatel. Rav Nachman says, it makes most sense to say that if he can worship, that if he can serve the Avodah Zara, so that he can nullify it. If he doesn't serve Avodah Zara, he cannot. Meisvei, so he asked the following question against that, right? Against Rav Nachman. Yisrael shematza avodas kochavim b'shuk. If you have a Jewish person and he finds idolatry in the market, ad shelo basal liyado, so he hasn't picked it up. Once he picks it up, there's nothing we can do about it. It's already his. Now we can't nullify it. So before he picks it up, omer le'ove kochavim umevat lo. He can go call over a idol worshiper and he can nullify it. Mishe basal liyado. Eino omer le'ove kochavim umevat lo. Once he takes into his possession, he said he can't nullify it. Mibnei she'amru, because they said ove kochavim mevatel ove kochavim shelo v'shel chaveiro. The Mishnah had stated, right, that an idolater can nullify idolatry that belongs to himself and idolatry that belongs to another idol worshiper. Bein ovda, bein shelo she'ein ovda, whether he has worshipped it or he has not. So he can nullify, but once it's a Jew, he cannot. So now that's the main point we're going to discuss. My ovda umay she'eno ovda. What does this mean by it doesn't matter whether he served it or he didn't serve it, he can nullify it? If we're talking about both of these circumstances, right, that that both of them are idol worshippers, so then that's the case that we mentioned. He and his fellow, he can nullify his idol and he can nullify his friend's idol. El lav ovda ove kochavim u'mayshe'ino ovda ger toshav. So isn't it? What does it mean? Meaning in this case, to clarify, right? We said that, right? He can nullify it whether he serves it or he doesn't serve it. So what do we mean by he serves it? Means that are we saying that one serves idols, he can nullify it, and the other one doesn't serve idols, he can also nullify it? And so ushma mina ger toshav nami mevatel, and therefore that seems to imply that a ger toshav can also nullify it. He said even if he doesn't serve idols, he can nullify it. And that opposes what Rav Nachman said. Rav Nachman seemed to say that it makes sense. Only if you worship idols can you nullify it. So no, that does not disprove. Liolam emalach, I will explain to you what the case is. That we're talking about one idol worshiper and the other idol worshiper. One worships it, one does not worship it. What are we talking about? Idi ve'idi oved kochavim. They're both idol worshippers, right? Both of the person who's worshiping, the other ones, they're both idol worshippers. Uda kamart, and now the question is, Hainu shelo v'shel chavero, you said that one idol worshiper can nullify his idol and his friend's idol. Isn't that the same case? No. Reisha zeh v'zeh lifor v'zeh lezeh limarkos. The first case is you have two idol worshippers. They both worship the same God, right? So this one can nullify his idol worship, and he can nullify his friends because they're both worshiping the same thing. Seifa, the next case is zelip or vizela markulus, that they're both idol worshippers. Just one worships one type of idolatry, one worships the other type of idolatry. That circumstance as well. One worships one type of idolatry, and one worships the other type of idolatry. That can also, he can nullify the other fellow's idolatry despite the fact that he doesn't worship that kind. However, that does not mean, to contradict what Rav Nachman says, that if this non-Jew doesn't worship idols at all, that he can still nullify idols, because once he is a law-abiding non-Jew, then he can no longer nullify idols. Okay, so we'll try again. Meisvei, we'll ask again. Ezu ger toshav, what makes somebody a ger toshav? What's a law-abiding non-Jew? So the answer is, kol shekibel alav bifnei gimel chaverim, he goes in front of a beis din of three, and he testifies, he affirms, shelo la'avod avodas kochavim. He says, I will no longer worship idols. That's his declaration. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says you have to do. Now it's like almost a conversion of some sorts. There's like you've elevated yourself from being a general idol worshiper to being now a non-Jew who's committed against idol worship. That's what happens. And your status changes. We see halachically, the status changes. There's the responsibility of Jews. We said, remember, we had responsibilities that we had talked about. Jews don't have as much responsibility to protect the life of idolaters. But once this person becomes a ger toshav, then we have responsibilities of making sure that we take care of him and sustain him in the social network, right? So if you have he's unable to sustain himself, he gets injured, he has you have to do everything that you can in your power to rescue him, right? He becomes this a next level.
What about the halachos with regards to like yain nesach? Is it
coming up all kinds of questions as well, right? So whether he can be yain, whether his yain nesach laws change as well, right? So we'll see. The Chachamim say kol shekibel olav sheva mitzvos shekiblu aleihem b'nei Noach. The Chachamim disagree with Rabbi. They say no. His commitment has to be to the 7 mitzvos b'nei Noach. If he commits to the 7 mitzvos b'nei Noach in front of a beis din, that makes him a ger toshav, right? Elevated status. Acherim omrim, others say elu lo ba'u lichlal ger toshav. That's not enough. Those two declarations are not enough. Ela ezehu ger toshav. What makes you a ger toshav? Ze ger ochel nevelos shekibel olav l'kaim kol mitzvos hamuros b'Torah. He's a non-Jew who still eats not kosher, but he's going to take upon himself all mitzvos in the Torah. Now that seems like quite an amount to take upon himself. Chutz meiser nevelos, except for eating kosher. Now, where the Mefarshim explain, that's not to indicate that he's going to keep all mitzvos. I think that it means, so in second, which ones what was it? It is all the, is it the positives or the next ones? Amen. He says, I think he's accepting upon himself all the lo sases in the Torah, except for eating non-kosher, right? He can still eat non-kosher, right? So that's not an issue. He can eat non-kosher, but also he can. But other than that, he doesn't do any of the other prohibitions. So he doesn't, including things like not violating Shabbos. It would seem, and things. Although there are other Gemaras that talk about somebody is chayav, a non-Jew is chayav misa if he keeps Shabbos. So therefore, there are questions on how you reconcile the two things. But in any event, this is a higher level. Now, somebody who is a ger toshav, whatever your definition of the requirement to be able to become a ger toshav, miyachadin etzlo yayin, vein mafkidin etzlo yayin. So you can leave him alone with wine, right? There's no issue that you have to worry about yayin nesech anymore. However, you're not allowed to leave the wine with him in his property, in his possession, for lengthy periods of time. Why? Because there's a concern. His wine is still considered stam yeinam, right? Because he's still not Jewish in the sense he's stam yeinam. But you're only worried that he's going to think your wine is of higher quality, and he's going to exchange his wine for your wine. And so you'll wind up with non-kosher, non-Jewish wine. But you're not worried that he's going to take your wine and turn it into yain nesach, because he doesn't do that sort of thing. Okay? So that's why for short periods of time, there's absolutely nothing to worry about with him. But for a lengthier period of time, you leave him some nice high quality wine, he's going to say, you know what, I could use a drink, I'm going to take that wine, and I'll replace it later with my own. Right? That's what we're worried about.
But that could be a problem with Vushal?
Well, wine you don't have to cook, right? So there's no bishul akum issues. The issue is it's still non-Jewish person manufacturing wine that you have to stay away from midrabanan. Okay, vafilu be'ir sheruba ovdei kochavim. Even if you're in a city, by the way, that most are non-Jews. Why? Because he's not going to do idol worship. Doesn't matter how many non-Jews are Jews. Shmano keyeno. His oil is like his wine. Now, what does that mean, oil like wine? Wine is prohibited, oil is permitted. So what does that oil like wine sounds like?
Not all oils are permitted.
Well, I mean, yes, obviously, the animal fats and those kinds of, but I was saying his oil being his olive oil, right? As we said, his olive oil is permitted, sounds like we're saying, shmano kiyeno salkadaitach. What are you saying? His olive oil becomes prohibited like his wine? That doesn't make sense. Shemen mikahavi yayin nesech. We don't have the same kinds of problems of oil when it comes to yayin. As we discussed, that there was an intention at some point to try to prohibit oil, but they decided against it. Endeavor took. Ella yeno kishmano. What we mean to say is his wine is like his oil, right? Ulishar kol davar harehu ke'ove kochavim. Right. So now, so that means his wine is like his oil in that it's not. I don't think it's prohibited to get benefit. Is that what the issue is?
Not for benefit.
Right. Not for benefit. Right. There's no prohibition for benefit. Ela yeno kishmano, which is mutter b'hano ba'asar shtia, but can't drink it, right? And that was it. They can't drink it, but you can get benefit out of it, which we decide also by the non-Jew. That was the takana that they wanted to establish as well for their oil. Now, Rabbi Shimon says yeno yayin nesach. He says no. I disagree. He says that their wine is going to be still yayin nesach. It's going to be prohibited to get any benefit because at the end of the day, he's not Jewish. And that means his friend and neighbor, who's also not Jewish, who he hangs around with, may come over to his house and fool around with his wine and whatever, and wouldn't bother him that he doesn't worship idols. You're not worried about him, but you're worried about his known associates. Right. So therefore, you would have it. The Amri law, and some say that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, mutter b'shtia, that he said, actually, no, completely permissible. Once you know he's not going to do any Avodah Zara, the takana of the Chachamim never applied to him in the first place, and therefore not only is it permitted for benefit, it's permitted even for drinking his wine. Okay, so that answers it. Jeremy was here back at the day, and he asked the question, so this was his question, this is his answer.
Nesach wine?
Nesach wine is the wine that was consecrated for idolatrous purposes. So it has a prohibited status to drink or get any benefit out of it, just simply by the non-Jew touching it. Then it becomes that way. Ketani miha. Now, nevertheless, what do we say? L'shar kol dvarav harehu ka'ovei kochavim. Right? That as far as anything else is concerned, this Ger Toshav, he's a non-Jew. Right? He's like an idolater. As far as everything else, we talked about the differences when it comes to Yayin Nesach. We talked about the differences, right, as far as which mitzvos he's keeping. But as far as other halachos of whether he's an idolater or not an idolater, he's like any other idolater. So lemai hilchasa, what practical other differences are there? What's the importance of that statement? Lav demevatel avodos kochavim ka'ovei kochavim. Isn't that the point of question we started with at the top of the page, that can this non-idolatrous non-Jew nullify idols And it would seem to be the answer is yes, because we're saying he's exactly like any other non-Jew. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, no. Litain rishus, ulevatel rishus. What we say is that he's like a non-Jew as far as the halachos of Eruv is concerned. So, quick, ukedetanya, we're going to briefly dive into the rules of Eruvin for a moment, which is not a subject that we've been discussing, but it has nothing to do, the issue of him being a non-Jew is not relevant to the issue of nullifying idols. It's not relevant to the issue of if you've got a courtyard. Okay, so the halacha is you've got a courtyard of multiple people, so each one has their private domain. From a Torah perspective, going from a private domain to a private domain is not a problem on Shabbos. The only problem going from a private domain to a public domain. To be a public domain, you need a street, it has to have a certain width, a certain amount of traffic. So here you've got a group of backyards.
That's where the Erev kicks in.
That's where the Erev kicks in. That's exactly right. So that's our point. So you've got...
How could wine be used as an idol?
It was not as an idol. It was used to serve idols, right? They would pour the wine out and say, this is my service to the idol, right? That was the service of the idol.
Okay.
So I've got, my house here. I've got a house here. I've got a house here. And I've got a house here. And in every one of them has their backyard, right? They have a fence, connects. This is baseball, but it was not intentional. But this is the backyard for everybody's backyards, okay? So they all share this common area. So from a Torah perspective, it's all a private domain. It's not an issue. The problem is that since it's multiple people's private domains, the Rabbanan said, we don't want you carrying there. It's too close to the ideal. When you're going to transfer from this person's yard to this person's yard, you go from this person's house, this person's yard. So here's what we want you to do. Everybody just make a unified pact together that you're all just one domain together. How do you do that? You buy one meal together, matzah, usually it's a matzah or something like this, and you all go into it together, everybody donates to it, and then that item gets stored in one location in one of these houses, and it represents the pact, we are all one household. Now you've merged all of these 4 households into one household, now you can carry in there. The wrench in the works is where one of the folks now he wasn't home, he didn't participate, right? So everybody normally every Erev Shabbos they get together, they have a little Toameha before Shabbos, and they get together and say, now we're out here, hey, let's make the Erev. They all throw in their $2, so they put the Erev, the guy goes, here's my Erev for everybody, brings it to his house. 1 week, the guy's not there.
Uh-oh.
Okay? He shows up, sorry, I came home late, I missed the Toamel, what did I miss? The Erev, none of us can carry in our house. Well, he has a ability to do what's called a bittul rishus. He can say, you know what? I nullify my rights to my property for the Shabbos. So I have no rights. Now you guys can take it and use it as you feel. If he does that, now everybody can carry in the area because he's not considered to be an extra household.
Within their daladamas, whatever.
No, within the whole backyard, right? Within their backyard. The whole backyard becomes one whole thing, okay? That's what we're discussing. Problem is worse, though, if one of the people in the courtyard is not Jewish. If he's not Jewish, he can't simply nullify his property rights to everybody else in the area, and that will bring us to some difficulties. Ukidetanya, as we learned in a brisa. Let's say I've got a Yisrael Mumar, Mishmar Shabbaso Bashuk. So let's say I've got a Jewish fellow, he's not that Shomer Shabbos, right? He hasn't really, but out in public he does, right? Guy goes to shul, he, participates in things, comes home to his house, closes the door inside his house, he watches some TV, okay? That guy, he, right, Mishmar Shabbos Bashuk, he keeps Shabbos in the marketplace, Mevato Rishus. He is still considered a Shomer Shabbos enough Jew that he has the ability to nullify his property to his neighbors and be a nice guy to let them carry. He's allowed to do it.
Even he's doing Chol Shabbos?
Even though he's doing it because he's only doing it privately, right? So because he's Michal, right? In quiet, he can be Mevatel as Rishus by the other people. So then, She'ein mishamar Shabbos b'shuk. But let's say this guy is a public Shabbos desecrator, gets into his car, drives to work, comes home. That guy ein mevatel rishus mipneh. He can't nullify his property and give it to everybody else. Mipnei she'amru, because they said Yisrael nosin rishus and mevatel rishus. A Jewish person who acts like a Jewish person is allowed to nullify his property and is not allowed to, and is allowed to non-nullify his property, whatever it is. He's mevatel his rishus. He can do that. He can give property. He can do that, but that is the rule. But in Ovei Kochavim, right? He's non-Jew, so he can't, right? So what does he have to do? Let's say you have a Ovei Kochavim. What do you have to do if you've got a non-Jew living in the courtyard? How are we supposed to get him? So he can't simply nullify his rishus. You have to do. In order for you to get his property to become involved, ad sheyiskor, you have to rent the rights to his property from him, right? You have to say, we're actually, us three are renting your property for Shabbos so that we can have your property as our property so it can join in our Eruv. Ketzad, how does it work? Omer lo, he has to say to him, Rishusi kinuya lach, my Rishus is acquired to you, right? You're buying the property rights. Rishusi mivutelis lach, or my rishus is nullified to you. Kana so then kana, then that works. Then that works. Ve'ein tzarich lizkos, and he doesn't have to. As long as he makes this declaration, right? Then he doesn't have to. This is the ketzad is how does the Yisrael, the Jewish person, how does he mevatel? He says, my rishus is given over to you, my rishus is nullified to you, and he doesn't need to give any other kinyan. The non-Jew, on the other hand, needs to have some sort of a kinyan. So therefore, this question about what status this non-Jewish fellow who is a ger toshav, what's his status? Is he like the Jew? Is he like the non-Jew? The answer is he is not like a Jew. His property has to be rented. You have to rent his property. That's what we say. He's like a non-Jew in regards to the other halachos because he doesn't keep Shabbos. Rav Yehuda shadar le kurbana la'avidrana biyom edom. New issue, right? Rav Yehuda gave a present to a non-Jew. His name was Avidrana on a holiday. It was a non-Jewish holiday, right? Amar Yadana Bey Dilo. So the question is, how does he do such a thing, right? We learned first Mishnah. We learned you can't do business with non-Jews on their holidays 3 days before, right? Can't, because they'll praise their gods. So the answer is, Amar, he said, Yadana Bey Dilo Palach Lavodas Kochavim. I know he doesn't worship that idolatry, right? So therefore I gave him a present. So of course the Mefarshim want to know, so then why did he send it? Right? He doesn't worship, why did you send it? So interesting, I think it's what was the Ritva? It says that it was like a New Year's Day. Like essentially, it was a day that everybody is celebrating. This guy doesn't worship the Avodah Zara, but they're still celebrating, right? That's like a lot of the modern non-Jews. They go out on New Year's Day. They're not. It might have historical Avodah Zara elements to it, but most of the people who are going out partying now are doing it simply because it's New Year's Day, right? So therefore,
people usually celebrate New Year's Eve.
Right. They celebrate New Year's Eve. Right. Correct. Yeah. By New Year's Day, they're asleep. So.
And hungover.
Likely, yes.
So therefore, right, this has practical ramifications. Tosfos I don't have the beginning of the Gemara here, but the Tosfos at the very beginning of the Masechta talks about that a lot of the rules of dealing with idolaters that applied in the times of the Gemara don't apply nowadays, because we really don't have committed idolaters anymore, right? A lot of the non-Jews that we have are not that into it.
Yeah.
So if you are in your work and they're doing a Secret Santa, for example, it may not be problematic as it once was to do a Secret Santa because you're not contributing to their Avodah Zara by giving them a little tchotchke to put on their desk, right?
There's a lot of Yidden who play as the mall Santa.
So yeah, that's a different, because there was a guy in Norfolk, right? He was an elderly Jew fellow with a little boich, and he's got this long beard. And he walked. He says he was Israeli, right? He says, I walk into the mall, and I come in, right? And they come and they see me, and they saw me, and the guy, some guy was, goes, I'm the manager of the mall. Could you play Santa Claus? He's like, what's a Santa Claus? He had no idea. He came from Israel, right? So show him. He says, I was Santa Claus for the year. They gave him a red suit.
Red suit.
He was perfect. He had the big white beard and a boich.
So a Jew can play Santa Claus.
I don't know that he can. I'm just saying that he did. Whether you can or you can't. I know that Santa Claus may or may not have any spiritual ramifications. It might have Coca-Cola ramifications, right? Right.
Coke created Santa.
That's correct. Well, at least the red suit. In any event, there's the idea of a Saint Nicholas. And in any event, so but yes, right. So there may be issues there. There may not be. It's worthwhile to ask questions before you presume to know. I'm not as a halachic expert here on the topic, but just as we're learning through the Gemaras, it's clear that it's not as big a problem as they made this case. He said to present, it wasn't an issue. Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef said to him, so vehatanya, but we learned in a brisa, ezu ger toshav. What makes you a ger toshav? Kol shekibol av bifnei gimel chaverim shelo lavodas kachavim. So he says he has to testify. He has to decide in front of 3 chaverim that he's not going to worship the Avodah Zara. Now, this fellow you sent tonight a gift to. I get it. You say you know that he doesn't keep the Avodah Zara, but he hasn't declared himself a ger toshav. So Kitanya, he said that price is lachayoso. That is to elevate him to the status of a protected non-Jew, right? That you have to save him from trouble. As far as sending him presents or so, he doesn't have to be a ger toshav to permit you to send him presents.
What's a ger toshav?
Ger toshav is this elevated non-Jew who basically declares that he's going to follow the rules. What the rules are, that was subject to a 3-way argument, right? Whether the rules means that he commits to not worship idols, or the rules means he commits to the 7 Noachide laws, or the rules means he commits to all the prohibitions in the Torah other than keeping kosher.
And celebrating the Sabbath.
Right. He's going to do that.
The prohibition of Avodah Zara is a common element through all of those, though.
Yes, the Avodah Zara is the minimum according to everybody, right? You can't somehow be in any way, and that's why ultimately in all the times, and I've been saying non-Jew, but the word is an idolater, right? It says oved kochavim, right? He's an idolater. That's the defining characteristic of all of these negative people that we've been discussing. Not the fact that they're not Jewish necessarily, because you can have a person who's not Jewish who is a ger toshav. That was the ger. You have to write. You don't need note cards.
They commit to the Noahide, the 7 Noahide.
Oh, so
Right.
they're non-religious, they're non-Jewish tzaddikim.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Now, V'hamar Rabba Bar Chana said, Amar Yochanan Rabbi Yochanan, Ger Toshav she'avru alav Yud Beis Chodesh v'lomal harehu kemin. So, she'ba'ovdei kochavim. What about the fact that Rabbi Bar Chana says that a ger toshav's his declaration only lasts 12 months, right? So if he makes this a month later, if he hasn't converted to Judaism, right? So at first he starts off saying, I'm a ger toshav. Well, if he doesn't go all the way and become a full-fledged Jew within 12 months, so then he is a min. He's like nothing. He's like back to square one. What about that? So that's, he says, Hasam kagon shekibo olav lamu v'lomal. That's different. That's where the guy was trying to convert, right? Here's this guy who says, I want to be Jewish. 12 months later, he hasn't gone through with it. Right now, we're not talking about... Correct, that's the going through with
but
it,
he has
right?
to go to mikveh as well.
And he goes to, yes, but he says v'lomal is the circumcision, which is the beginning of the conversion process. He hasn't done that, so that means he's really not committed to it. Well, if he's talking and not committing, then you can't believe anything that he's saying. He's talking, he's just making stuff up. But a person who commits and says, no, I have no plans to be Jewish. I just want to keep the 7 mitzvos b'nei Noach. That is that commitment stands and is considered something that's kept. Okay? Next. Rava amti le korbana lebar sheshach biyom edom. So Rava, right? He gave some kind of a gift to Bar Sheshach on their holiday. Okay, so Amar Yadana Bey Dilo Palach Lavos Kachavim. I said I could do that because I know he doesn't serve idols. Azul, so he went to him. Ashkeche de Yosef Ad Tzavare Bivarda. So he saw him, and he was in a compromised position. He says he was sitting there, and he was sitting in a bathhouse, right, in rose petal water up to his neck. The Kaiman zonos arumos kame, and he had a whole bunch of nude prostitutes all around him, right? So this is how he hangs out. Okay, he doesn't worship idols.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure.
Worships prostitutes.
That's correct. He's of the 7 mitzvos b'nei Noach, right? He might be okay. So Amar Lahu. So he said to Rava, who shows up to give him a present, Islu kahai gav nelam odasi. He says, "You guys, you don't have olam haba like this. There's no way your world to come is as good as this. Look what I got, right?" So Amar Le. So he says, "Didona difa tfei mehai." He says, "No, ours is better than that. Olam haba is way better than this." Amar Le tfei mehai mihava. He says, "There's nothing greater than this. What are you talking about? This is it. This is life."
Don't get better.
So Amar Le, he says, "Ason ika aleichu emasa demachusa." He says it's not true, because even though you're sitting in the lap of luxury, right, what you still have is your fear of the government. At any moment, anybody can take this away from you, right? So you don't know. So Anan lo tihavi alon emasa demachusa says we in the olam haba there's no fear of anything. Right, the Hashem, and the point of argument between them, the Farshim explain is, what's the point? Like, what's the bigger, the bigger pleasure? He was saying, look, this world has meaning. Even to the Jews, this world has meaning. This is a pleasurable world experience. So you have to see that this is the height of everything. To which Rav is saying, no, olam haba, which has no connection to the physical, is a higher pleasurable experience where you don't have pleasure in the sense of eating, drinking, and these other physical pleasures. The pleasures that are involved in that spiritual existence are loftier and greater, and that was their argument. Ultimately, the fact is that when you're in this world, your pleasures are at other people's whims. Right? The king can take it away at any moment. Amar Le, he says back to him, "Ana miha my demachusa ika." Allah, he says, "Yeah, but me. Look, I'm an important person. I have no fear of the king. I have nothing to worry about." Ad Diosvi, while he's still sitting there, also hahu pristaka de malka, there was a messenger who came from the king. Amrle kum deboilach malka. He says, "You got to get out. King needs you." Right while he was right there. Okay. Kinofik ve'ozir, while he was leaving and he was going on the way. Amrle eina deboil michse luchu bishusa tipaka. He says, "You know what? I curse myself. The eye that looked upon you with bad, Rava, should come out, right? I'm at fault. I spoke ill, I spoke wrong, and I regret it." Amar le Rava says, "Amen." He said, "Yes, you did. Amen." Paka eine de Barsheshach's eye came out.
Where do the 72 virgins come in?
So this is a good question. This Gemara probably is our source, right? This is where it comes. Yeah. Okay. So Amar Rav Papi. He says he should have told him this pasuk, which indicates how much better Olam Haba is than what he was experiencing. As the pasuk says, "Benos malachim biyakrusech notzva shagaliminech bekesem ofir." He says that that in Olam Haba, the Tilm says that in Olam Haba that the daughters of kings are going to be standing around offering to serve us in our. And give honor. So while here you have prostitutes in this world, right? The status of Jews is so elevated to the point that even people who have all of the physical pleasures of the world, like kings, they will give all of that up in order to be able to serve at the behest of the Jewish people, right? So that's an elevated level. That shows how much better the non-physical pleasures of the world are, that people who have all the physical pleasures will give that up to spend time with the Jews, because that's the best. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, that you can learn it from here. The pasuk says, "Ayin lo rasa Elokim elo zulascha yaseh lemechakelo." There's no eye that has ever seen anything besides Hashem has seen that of what Hashem will do for those that are awaiting for Him. Right? Nothing. You can't even imagine it. Nobody. Ayin lo, nobody's eye. He says Yeshua. There's nobody who's ever. Nobody but Hashem understands the true pleasures of Olam Haba. Okay. Now, back to our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah says, "Scharo la'asos imu malacha acheres," right? So if he hired a person to do some other type of work, and in the work is also working with yayin nesach, that we said was okay. Hired to do, our example, he was hired to work at the LCBO. One of the jobs in the LCBO is to schlep the non-kosher wine. We can't get benefit out of the non-kosher wine. This person,
stocking them on the shelves.
that's our problem, right? So he doesn't want to drop the bottles of wine. Why? Because he drops the bottles of wine, he's going to have to pay for it. So therefore, he wants the bottles of wine to be sustained. That's problematic, because you should never want to keep sustained a idolatrous item. Therefore, we just shouldn't be working. The answer is no. Since his job really is to man the cash register, his job is to sweep the floor, his job is to take all the carts in. If also the guy says, now put that bottle of wine, those bottles of wine on the shelf, that's okay, because he's not getting paid.
With the kid, that would be another problem. Not a Jew who's not from wants to buy non-kosher wine, and you're being from selling him a non.
Problematic, right? We said even owning that stuff might be problematic, right? Don't buy non-kosher wine if you want to give a gift to somebody in the
Or
office.
if you're already the register and the non from you want to buy the wine, you can't sell it to them.
That could be problematic as well. The question is whether that's lifnei iver lo sitain michshol, whether selling non-kosher items to somebody is problematic, whether you're a cashier at a supermarket store or something like that. Might be not so, because if you don't, they'll fire you and he'll move to aisle 7 instead of aisle 5. And so it may not be a problem, but ask your rabbi. The afagav delo omar, then some people say, what are you? So I'm like, yeah, the answer is I'm your Daf Yomi Shiur. I raise the issues, I don't solve the issues, right? Okay, I'm fine. One time when I retire from being a principal, I will spend more time doing my research before the shiur to be able to know the answer. V'afagav delo amar le'isuse erev. Now, this seems to imply that as long as he's got a bigger job to do, that's okay. It doesn't have to be the last thing of the night. Why do it have to be the last thing of the night? Because the guy gets paid $100 a day, right? The guy says, thank you very much, you've earned your $100. Oh, by the way, before you leave, could you put this on the shelf? Now, he's already earned his $100. Therefore, if he puts it on the shelf, he's not getting paid for that. This Mishnah seems to imply it doesn't have to be like that. It could be in the middle of the day. Part of his 8 wages that he's earning is put this on the shelf. So therefore, that is a question, because Uramini, we have a contradiction. Person said this Bryce says Hasochar Sapol Isuse Erev. He hires a worker, and right before he leaves, right after the wages are basically earned, Amar Lu, he says to him, Havir Chavis Shel Yain Nesach Mimakom Makom, drag this barrel of Yain Nesach wine from place to place. Schara Mutter, his wages are now permissible. Taima, the reason why it's permissible is Damar Le, Lucy Erev, because he said it's nighttime, we're ready to leave. Before you go, and you've already earned your money, do me a favor. So now he's not getting paid for this. He's doing, yeah. So the answer is in Kuli Yami. So Lucy Erev he could do it right before he leaves, but Kol Yomi Lo, but not during the rest of the day. So Rabbi, so Rabbi explains, Kitnan Nami Masnisin Damar Lususi Erev. He says, no, our Mishnah also means it has to be like the last thing of the day, right? The last thing does, so he's not getting paid for it, right? During the break, right? Then he could do it. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Rava says, Lo Kasha. Lucy Erev. Our Mishnah is talking about it in the night. So now Rava says, no, not necessarily. Amar, Lo Kasha, it's not a contradiction though. Had Amar Le, Ha'aver li mea chavios b'mea prutos. That is where we're talking about. The person says, I want you to move these 100 barrels. Your wages are $100. 100 prutos for 100 barrels. Okay, that's what's happening here. So if he does that, then the wage is for moving all 100 barrels. So if he's got 99 barrels, not even bottles of kosher wine, right on the wall, and he happens to put one more up there on the 100th one up there, right? So then the job's not done until he gets the 100th one up. So therefore, that's why he can't do it. Now, if he's done 100 barrels of wine, and then afterwards he says, oh, could you do me a favor, do one more? Then that would be okay. But you can't do it if it's part of the contracted. In other words, it's almost like this prohibited barrel wine is part of the contract. So the other one is if he says, do every barrel for me for a pruta. Right? So then, then he says every single one of them, right? Every single barrel that he's bringing, he's getting paid for, and therefore all of the other money that he gets isn't prohibited. It's only that one pruta for that one barrel that he gets that might be prohibited. And what he can do is he can say, okay, I won't take that money, or he could decide to destroy that money or whatever, just won't get benefit from that one. Vehatanya, but we learn in a brisa, hasocher sapol v'amar lo havir limea chavios b'mea prutos. He says this exact case, right? This brisa says, I want you to move 100 barrels of wine for me for 100 prutos. V'nimtze chavis shel yayin nesach beinehen, and it turns out there's one barrel of yayin nesach there. Scharo aser, then his schar is prohibited. But chavis bepruta, if he says though, do each one at a time. But into chavis shel yain nesach beinehen, and in there is one wine bottle of yain nesach scharamutter, then the wages are permissible, and so therefore that supports Rava's statement. Okay. Hasocher es hachamur lahavi aleha yain nesach scharo aser. Okay. So this now, the next case is guy rents a donkey, and he says, you bring the yayin nesach over, so the wages that he gets for renting the donkey out are prohibited. Well, hatu lamali, why do I need the new case? You just told me I can't get benefit by schlepping yayin nesach, and now you're telling me I can't get benefit by renting my donkey to schlepp yayin nesach. It's the same to halacha. Hainu reisha. So he says that's the same as the previous case. No, seifat strichale. The end is necessary because schara leisheva leha. Because we need it for the next case. You're right. The other previous part, if he hires the donkey, that the wage we prohibited is not anything new. But what is new is that if he rents the donkey in order to sit on it, even though he puts his wineskin that has yayin nesach in it on the donkey, scharamutter, it's permissible. Lememra delagin lav dinahu loosvei. He says, but what are you implying? That when a person rents a donkey to sit on, he doesn't have the rights to put his wine flask on? Isn't that included? Obviously, that would be part of it. So, uramini, we have a contradiction. I'll show you that putting a wineskin on the animal when you rent the animal is perfectly permissible. Hasocher es hachamor. If somebody rents a donkey, what are your rights when you rent the donkey? Right? It's not like you rent a car, because you need a donkey driver to go with it. And if you're going on a trip with the donkey, so that means the donkey's got to carry the cargo, that's why you're renting it, but the donkey driver also has to carry the supplies that you need for the donkey to eat and the food for the way.
Does he need to take out insurance on the donkey?
No, he might, because what will happen is that if he doesn't, then he's responsible for paying. But the donkey driver, right, it's like hiring a taxi, right? When you get in the taxi, since the driver's driving the taxi, right, so you don't have to take out insurance on the taxi because the driver is operating. He's operating his own vehicle. So the donkey driver is operating his own donkey. So you don't have to worry about that, right? But the question is, when you're hiring the donkey driver, what part of the donkey, what does the donkey driver have the rights to use on the donkey, and what does the person who's renting the donkey have the rights for, right?
How does all this pertain to us today?
This, as far as donkeys specifically, nothing, but it does show us that practically speaking, when you're making a business deal and arrangement with somebody, let's say I want to go to the airport, right? I've got a taxi, and it doesn't have to be precisely this similar, right? But it's $100 to get to the airport. Great, I'll take it. The guy pulls up in his car, open the trunk, it's already full of stuff. I can't put my suitcase in. Is that not included in my $100?
Should be.
Well, it should be, because that's customary and regular when it comes to the rights of who's the cargo space. When I say I'm going to the airport, is I'm supposed to be able to put my 2 suitcases in the trunk.
You would think the Uber driver,
right?
whoever your driver is.
Now, if he shows up and I've got 27 suitcases,
That's different.
right? Then and I want to shove it into the front seat, and he says, no, the front seat is not for passengers, not for luggage. That's where I keep my stuff. He's entitled to do that, right? That's what's regular and customary in business is what's accepted. So that's what this is teaching us. That's what in practice for modern times. They use donkeys, okay? So in their times, socher maniach aleha kisuso v'leginaso umezonosov. The renter is allowed to put his his garments on there, and he can part his wineskins and his food, shel oso haderech, that he needs for that trip. Mikan ve'elech, chamar me'akev lov. But if he wants to put more on it, the donkey driver can say, that's too much cargo, right? I need to protect the health of my donkey. Because the guy might want to be able to, he says, well, I'm in a place where food is cheap. So I'm going to pack not only food for today, but we'll be coming back tomorrow. I want to pack more. I'll pack for my return trip. Can't pack for the return trip.
But the guy could charge you more for storage or whatever, if need be.
Well, but that's not what's included in the normal rate for the donkey. My trip there to wherever it is we're going, that's included. Okay? Chamar, the donkey driver, maniach aleha, he can put on their saorim v'teven, he puts on barley, puts on wheat, umezonosov, and his food, shall also yom, for the day. Now the trip might take multiple days. He's only allowed to store for 1 day's food. Now, mikan ve'elech, socher me'akev. From there on, the guy who's renting it can say, hey, that's too much stuff to put on the donkey. I reserve the rights to be able to keep my stuff on. So Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, Nihi de login dinahu lo suve miha ilo mosiv le miamrinan le nochi le agra dalginhu. Min nochi le. So he says, even though you're right for the he's allowed to. It says clearly that he's allowed to put his wineskins on it. So, however, if the renter doesn't put his container onto the animal, can he say, right? Is he allowed to say to him, I want to take the wages back, right? I would like to not have to pay since I didn't bring, right? Because the guy said $100 to the airport. I only didn't bring a suitcase, so I'd like to have a discount, please. No, that you can't do, right? You don't have to deduct the wages for the item that's missing. Okay, so now, so heichi dami. Where did I go? Heichi dami. So what is the circumstance this Bryce is talking about? So he says, if there's a place, there's plenty of place to find food, right? They're going through the traveling streets. Then why shouldn't the donkey driver be able to tell the guy who's renting the donkey, you can't put all of your stuff for the whole trip on here. You should just buy food tonight. We'll stop at a hotel. You'll buy at the hotel. Why is he allowed to keep all of the stuff? And if there's no place to buy food along the way, then the renter shouldn't be able to tell the donkey driver that he can't store his food because he needs food for the whole journey. Why is it that the renter only gets the renter gets enough food for the whole time, and the donkey driver only gets to be able to store 1 day's worth?
I'll tell you why, because there's only passenger. He has other passengers as well.
Usually donkeys don't carry more than one person. That's a good thought, right? It's just that the answer is Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says Lo tzricha d'shchiach l'mitrach u'lemezavein me'ona la'ona. Says the answer is it's not such a path that there's lots of places to buy food, right? There's places to buy, but you have to know where they are. Chamar, the donkey driver, that's his job. That's what you're getting paid for. You're getting paid to be able to provide cargo space. Therefore, when you arrive at your hotel, go shopping, right? Go into the stores, go buy the stuff that you need for tomorrow. That's the job. Socher,
like that back then?
yeah. So socher, the renter, lav darchei lemitrach lumizavin. That's not his job. His job is he paid for the fare for the way. Therefore, he doesn't have to go searching. Avodah Rav Acha, braid Rav Ika, the Avua of Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, Hava shapich lehu chamra le'ovdei kochavim. So he was pouring wine for idolaters. Okay, so it was his wine. I think so. So the wine was kosher. He's pouring it for idolaters. Now, how did he make his money? So he would pour it into the wine containers of the idolaters. The wine containers of the idolaters.
Or whatever.
Yeah, into their wineskins and whatever. So therefore, once it's in their containers, it becomes prohibited. Mm-hmm. So then, the azah me'aver lahu me'aver. And so then he would take the wine across the river for them. Right, that was his job. He would transport the wine. V'yavu lehe gulfei ba'agra. And then, as a result, he would then take the barrels that the wine came in as his payment. Normally, the process was that when you buy a barrel of wine, you buy the barrel and the wine. Right? So he made the wine, now he's got barrels in the wine. His payment for the wine was that he got to keep, or I guess payment for the transportation was. So they bought the wine, and then the transportation payment was you get to keep your barrel. So he would pour the wine into their containers and transport it.
So I've seen barrels of wine. They're huge.
Yes.
I'm thinking these barrels were much smaller than.
It may have
How
been.
do you transport a barrel of wine on a donkey?
They put it on a ship. This case,
Yeah,
right? This they shipped it. They shipped it
ferry.
on a ship, right?
Yeah, and
A ferry.
once it's across the river. Yeah.
Oh,
He's ferrying it.
okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, right? When we talked about the donkey, they poured it into some kind of wineskins and things. That's what we had that.
They have options, like if the donkey was too small, you can order an ox.
It's a good question. I don't know, so order up. Depends on what kind of
Because an ox
Avis
can carry more
upgrade.
stuff.
You have an upgrade.
Yeah, it's like Uber. I don't need a car. I need a 7-passenger van.
Yep.
Fair question. Depends on the company you're using. So the answer is they weren't sure how he was able to do this because at the end of the day, it was his wine, but he poured it into their containers. That makes it yayin nesach. He's not allowed to schlep the yayin nesach for everybody and get benefit from helping the yayin nesach. So how did he do this? So Asu Amru Le Abaye, they came to Abaye. Amar Le, so he said, Ki katarich behetera katarich. He says he's doing everything. When he's moving the wine, it's not prohibited yet. It's his wine, right? But until it gets poured into the containers, right? That is all his. The harotza b'kiyumo. But now, okay, so it's in the containers. It's on the ship. And he's not the one who actually does the shipping, right? He hires boats in order to bring it across. So those are he's not doing the work. So he says, okay, but he wants the wine to exist at the end of the day. Why? Because if now the wineskins break, they'll come and ask for a refund for the wine they didn't get. So the answer is, Ziki. He says they know that part of the deal is that he's not responsible for any damages. So he doesn't care. At that point, right, once he pours into their containers, what you get, not our problem. Go to the ferries and take it. Okay. Demasni bahadaihu, because that was the condition that they made. Inami, or demaisu prisdiki bahadaihu. Or the other answer is, the people were told, bring backup utensils, because I'm not paying for anything you lose. So if you have wineskins and one of them breaks, bring a backup. Okay, that was the answer.
Not a problem.
And therefore, right, correct. Now I don't have to worry about your broken wineskins. Right? Your wineskins, which are prohibited, I don't have to worry about them. But he's carrying the wine across the river at the end of the day. So the answer is dekatarich bisura, and he's helping something which is prohibited. So the answer is da'amarle lemavruya meikara. He made the agreement with the ferry drivers in advance. Right? When the guys come, just take them across the river. It wasn't his. He didn't pay the ferry drivers. They're not doing it for him. That's their job, right? He paid in advance. Guys come, right? Inami, the Nikiti Bekitri, that he had given them some ropes with knots in them, like tokens. When you go to the ferry, give them this and they'll know that it came from me, and then that will let you take the ferry across. But bottom line is the ferry drivers were working for themselves, right? Getting paid by this fellow to bring it across, right? They were paid in advance. Whoever I to send to you, take across. So therefore, I guess it's almost like the case where they hired the person for all the work, and if some of it was right, then that would be
Right.
They hired a logistics guy.
Or I guess the ferry driver wasn't Jewish, right? Then it's probably okay for him to do it also, right? The ferry driver wasn't Jewish. Okay, stop there.